Well, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned world leaders that ending the burning of fossil fuels is the only way to stop global warming. Speaking at the formal opening ceremony of the UN's COP28 climate summit in Dubai, Guterres said that reducing fossil fuel usage wouldn't be enough to prevent climate disaster. On Thursday, he got talks off to a quick start with a landmark deal to help the world's poorest countries cope with the impacts of the climate crisis. Now, a short while ago, Britain's King Charles held the day's opening address at the summit. Let's have a listen in to some of what he had to say.
I pray with all my heart that COP28 will be another critical turning point towards genuine transformational action at a time when already, as scientists have been warning for so long, we are seeing alarming tipping points being reached. I've spent a large proportion of my life trying to warn of the existential threats facing us over global warming, over climate change and biodiversity loss. But I was not alone. For instance, Sheikh Mohammed's dear father, Sheikh Zayed, was advocating for clean energy at a time even before the United Arab Emirates as such came into being. All these decades later, and despite all the attention, there is 30% more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere now than there was back then, and almost 40% more methane. Some important progress has been made, but it worries me greatly that we remain so dreadfully far off track, as the Global Stocktake report demonstrates so graphically. The dangers are no longer distant risks. I have seen across the Commonwealth and beyond countless communities which are unable to withstand repeated shocks, whose lives and livelihoods are laid waste by climate change. Surely, real action is required to stem the growing toll of its most vulnerable victims. Repeated cyclones batter vulnerable island nations like Vanuatu and Dominica. India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan have been experiencing unprecedented floods, and East Africa is suffering a decades-long drought. This past summer, in common with Spain, Greece, the United States, and many other countries, Canada experienced its most severe wildfire season on record, with 18.5 million hectares of land burned, causing terrible loss of life and property, and, of course, releasing enormous amounts of greenhouse gases that contribute to dangerous feedback loops to which climate scientists have been alerting us for decades. As I've tried to say on many occasions, unless we rapidly repair and restore nature's unique economy based on harmony and balance, which is our ultimate sustainer, our own economy and survivability will be imperiled. Records are now being broken so often that we are perhaps becoming immune to what they are really telling us. When we see the news that this last Northern Hemisphere summer, for instance, was the warmest global average temperature on record, we need to pause to process what this actually means. We are taking the natural world outside balanced norms and limits and into dangerous, uncharted territory. We are carrying out a vast, frightening experiment of changing every ecological condition all at once, at a pace that far outstrips nature's ability to cope.
Here to tell us more is DW's climate correspondent Louise Osborne. Good to see you, Louise. What did you make of what we just heard from King Charles?
I mean, it was really to be expected. He's known as a king who is very interested in climate issues and sustainability. He's shown that for a long time. This is not the first time that he's spoken at the COP. He spoke as Prince of Wales back then at the COP in Paris and also in Glasgow. So a lot of what he's said is things that we've heard before, but it really is a call to action for the governments and leaders that are there represented from today to take action and to really step up and increase ambition at the COP this year.
We're often waiting down to the 11th hour for language to be agreed upon at these summits, for something to happen at the very last minute. But this one got off to a really fast start on day one. The landmark deal, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think it caught us all a little bit by surprise. This is the loss and damage fund that was agreed would be established last year at the climate conference there, but has already now been adopted. So this was negotiations that took place over the year. It's basically setting up financing for money to go towards developing countries that are suffering most when it comes to the impacts of climate damage. We've already seen some countries also pledging money to that now. Germany, $100 million, for example, and the United Arab Emirates, which is hosting an equal amount, but it's still not really enough. I mean, we're looking at damages that could be between 290 billion and €500 billion or dollars, every year, according to some estimates by 2030. So this is still a drop in the bucket, and we'll have to see what pledges come out of that as time goes on.
Yeah, many countries are pledging large sums of money for developing countries, while not doing enough to reduce emissions at home. How much a part of this sum is that behaviour?
Well, I mean, the problem is that the less action they take at home means the more the damage and losses that are going to be caused, which means more money that they have to add to that fund. So really, it's having a big impact that they're not making the reductions that they need to in terms of fossil fuel emissions or emissions from fossil fuels that they're burning at home. So they really need to step up that action, and that is going to be a big part of the COP this year. They're expected to set in place, or at least talk about setting in place, new targets for reducing their carbon dioxide emissions and other greenhouse gas emissions.
Dubai is hosting, obviously, and big countries are against a full phase-out and more in favour of a so-called phase-down. What does that mean exactly?
So a full phase-out would mean basically working to get rid of fossil fuels as part of our energy mix completely. There are lots of complexities when it comes to that. I mean, for example, so much of our energy is still based on the burning of coal. A phase down would be reducing carbon dioxide emissions through the reduction of fossil fuel use over time. We are going to have to see there are a lot of countries that are not ready for a complete phase out, including actually developing countries that are reliant on the money that they get from providing fossil fuel resources to the developed world.
Climate correspondent Louise Osborne, thanks so much.